Thank you very much. Thanks for joining. I guess we are having a different set of participants than this morning. I think this morning was mostly Europe-centered. Probably now it's some other parts of the world. So it's really nice to be able to connect with everybody. What I'm trying to do in the next, let's say, hour or so is to give you what happened that brought my proposal to get funded. It's basically sort of a story that we call the success story, but you will see that it's a convoluted success story because there's more to it than just the success. I will speak mostly about ERC, my ERC experience, but I actually hope that what I'm saying is going to have a larger meaning in terms of other research proposals. So you will see that there are parts that are really specific to the European Research Council and other parts that are more general into the writing tips and what worked for me in writing the proposal. So the ERC starting grants are actually really particular because they have a component, they have two components. Actually, one component is you, so the brilliant young researcher who is 7 years after his or her PhD and is about to propose a research project. So your profile will be evaluated. And on the other side, of course, as in any research proposal, it's about your idea. So the groundbreaking stuff you're proposing to do and you're asking a lot of money to do. And we will go through different phases that are exactly the phases I went through as I was writing my proposal and as I was getting evaluated. And we are going to see what happens what happened when I conceived my first ideas. What was the path that brought me into the inception of the idea, so streamlining it, bringing it to a fully mature idea. And you'll see that from conception to inception, many years maybe can go by. Then to writing, so fixing the idea on the paper. Then the ERC as a particular stage that many grants, for example, in Germany have already also, that is an interview stage where you actually go towards in front of the panel and you defend your proposal. It's a little bit like an interview that you have with the panel about your proposal. And then, of course, if you are successful with all of that, you get the big pot of money that is waiting for you and glory and whatnot. But if you're not successful, I'm already telling you that giving up is not an option, especially because ideas can be can evolve through time and can go on through time and go back to the drawing board is not a bad thing at all. I'll try to give to you this feeling. So here's a disclaimer that is going to be basically valid for the entire presentation. This is what worked for me. Luckily, we are all different. We have lots of different approaches to science, to life, to our to how we do things. So please take whatever you need. But if you think that something doesn't work for you, it will probably not work for you. So just leave it. Just don't take this as what I'm about to say as the truth that is descending upon you from somebody with high authority. I don't have any high authority. I'm just sharing my experience with you. Before as I told you that the ERC grant is made of two parts, so you and your idea. I thought it was useful to give you a sort of a little idea of my path, the path that brought me into the career stage where I wrote an ERC grant. If I had to define myself, I would like to define myself as a person who is attracted to things that I like to do, but that I don't know how to do. So I really love to explore new things and try to learn how to do them. Not successfully sometimes, but other times very successfully. So since my bachelor and master, I was always trying to learn and do something new and something that I liked. And sometimes I didn't really see the meaning into all of this until much later. For example, during my bachelor and master, the thing I really liked to do was getting data and analyzing them. And I was very lucky that very early in the process, I found a supervisor who was really pushing me to start publishing little papers, nothing groundbreaking, nothing very important, but he was really pushing me to put my ideas on paper and to send my papers to journals for peer review. My first paper came out pretty much when I got my master's. So if I go back and read that, as I did some time ago, I find so many things that I would not write today. But this is how life goes, right? This is how we mature as people and scientists. I was at the University of Genoa for my bachelor's and master's. I stayed for my PhD, University of Genoa in Italy. And during my PhD, it's actually a bit different from many PhDs that I've seen, for example, US bound or in other countries, where in your PhD, you really actually have great ideas and groundbreaking things. I kept working on things that I was attracted to, and this is what brought me into studying and into looking at fossils and paleo sea level changes and all of that. If I have to say why I did it, I just did it because I liked being outdoor. I liked being at sea at all times, and I really wanted to know more about climate, really. And this is where I sort of learned how to work into a project, follow my own interest more, and also published a little bit more. Then I had the luck to jump across the pond and take up a postdoctoral position at Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory, Columbia University. And this is really where everything got together in a way that I found somebody, a supervisor who was Maureen Ramo, professor and a very well-known name in climate sciences, who really helped me to understand that what I was doing before was really regional and had a sort of a local meaning to it. It's not less important, it's just more local, and it doesn't address the big questions. So this is where I really learned how to think bigger and to write better research proposals. We're going to go into that a little bit later. And this is also where I learned that the papers I was writing during my PhD and postdoc were making up a good quantity, but as of quality, I should have done better. And this is what I concentrated upon in those 2 years. In all this time, mostly because I was afraid I would remain without a job throughout this entire story, I started up my own spin-off company. So my idea was that if something was going bad in the world of science, as we know, can go bad and you can be without a job, at least I could actually sell my services to whoever was interested. So I opened up my own company together with friends and colleagues from my hometown university. And I should say that this turned out to be incredibly expensive in terms of effort, but also taught me really how to take budget responsibilities. And because when you are dealing with research budgets, sometimes you have the feeling that it's not really money out of your pocket, although it's out of the taxpayers' pockets. But when you are assuming budget responsibilities for a company that you own in part, actually that is out of your pocket. If things go bad, you lose money yourself. You just, if you don't bring a project to completion, that's a big problem, and you don't get paid, and maybe you get asked for a penalty out of that. So this is really taught me how to be really responsible about every penny that I work with with research budgets, also when I write them. I'm going a little bit into that. And in 2014, actually, I started up my position at the University of Bremen at MARUM, where I am now. And this is also when the game changed a little bit, because until then, I was sort of supervising students, as we all do while we're we're coming up in the ranks of academic life. But for the first time in 2014, I was really taking responsibility to supervise postdocs, master students, and PhD students in first person. So this was another jump in my career. And 2018, I froze it there because this is when I applied to the ERC. Now, just to give you a very quick overview of what I do as a job. I'm usually the guy who goes out in the field. I try to find fossils related to paleo sea level changes. I try to measure them as accurately as possible. And I try to give an age to them and to interpret what coastal processes were happening during the time they were formed, during the time they were deposited. Here I am on a fossil coral reef in the island of Bonaire in the Netherlands Antilles, and I'm looking at something that probably caught my interest, probably some fossil coral of particular interest. My main period of interest is the Last Interglacial, 125,000 years ago. I think as I'm speaking to a Pages ECN webinar, I think you are all aware of the fact that we are looking at the Last Interglacial as a process analog for future warmer worlds. So we are looking at this past warmer world, trying to understand a bit better what is going to happen in terms of processes and ice sheet melting in the next future. And as everyone expert in paleo sea levels or in sea level sciences, I have three big questions in my mind all the time, no matter what I do in terms of research. Sometimes I also have my hobbies, so I don't think about these questions really all the time. But there are three big questions. One is, how much will sea level rise? Will it go up a lot? 2 meters, 3, 4, 5, 6 meters? We don't know. How fast will it rise in the future, or how fast it rose in the past? And will there be stronger storms in the future, or were there stronger storms in the past? So these two slides, what I am and the big questions in the sea level sciences, were basically the conception of my idea. So these are the fixed points that I have in my baggage as a climate and sea level scientist, as a geoscientist, I would say. So this is my starting point. This is where I'm coming from when I started writing the ERC proposal. And of course, this is just some graphs that I put in my ERC grant to describe myself. Of course, it's great to describe yourself with words or telling what you do, but of course, on the other side, whoever is going to evaluate your ERC proposal wants to see some metrics about your publications, for example. And I did this histogram when I presented my my proposal by telling the number of publications and by basically telling the reviewers where I was in terms of my career. But I also was very open, because why not, in basically telling that my path was characterized by an early phase where I was really caring much more about quantity of papers that I was publishing than really quality. I know it doesn't sound good, but this is what I did. This is what happened to me. And I was working at regional and local scales. And then I sort of shifted throughout my maturity towards more global scales and more important papers, focusing more on quality, maybe less papers, but of higher quality. And then I shifted again into collaborative research, and then being senior author for papers authored by PhD students working with me or postdocs working with me. So this is the storyline I sort of drew up when I was proposing my profile to the ERC. And I did it in writing and I did it in graphs, as you see here. I basically put up some metrics of how many papers I did, the journal impact factor. I mean, personally, I don't really like the fact that journal impact factors count that much, but still it's a metric that some people will still look at. So why not being clear about it? and the position in the author list, etc. And of course, the H index. This is all, I don't want to pass the message that this is extremely important, but it's good to show up your characteristics, and especially what brought you at that point. What brought you at this point of writing this proposal? If the proposal, as the ERC grant, foresees that you present yourself, your profile as well in the proposal. So another thing that I think really helped me out a lot, and this has to deal with the thing that I'm incredibly attracted by things I like and I don't know how to do. Starting from the Mediterranean, that was my PhD, I really started to try and get into campaigns or try and collaborate with people. Sometimes we would even pay my tickets to join them in the field in exchange for help to do anything. I really tried to see as many places as possible and try to shape really my mind as a more global geoscientist. This is important for me, for example, but for other people, it could be that you learn a new programming language that is at the forefront of what you're doing, or that you collaborate with this really great scientist. And I should say that here I have been really, really pushy with all the people I've been working with to join them in the field, also at the expenses, sometimes also at the expenses of some long period away from home. But all this that I told you is to mean that publication statistics must be good. They have to mean something. They have to build up to a storyline. But also for the ERC and for many other grants that look at the CV of the researchers alongside with the idea, there are generally 4 very important points. So one is the demonstration, the demonstrated ability to propose and conduct groundbreaking research. And this is really intimidatory. So if you see that, you're like, oh my God, I cannot do that. When I looked at this for the first time, I told myself, look, you're not doing groundbreaking research, right? But the real key here is the ability to show the reviewers and to write your science and to propose something which is at the boundaries of your domain. It could be, for example, a site in the world that has great promise, but nobody really realized that, for example. Or it could be a different way of doing something that is really standard to do in a certain way, and you're proposing something different. Then you have the ability of creative and independent thinking, and a lot of this gets evaluated by looking at your publication history, especially in the ERC, and trying to understand if you are sort of detaching yourself from the group you have been doing your PhD with. So if you have been working with the group, and if you kept working inside that group, it might be perceived as if you're not trying to shape your own profile. You might have been instead inside the same group, but shaping your own research within the same group, and then it might be a proof for independent thinking, but you have to make the reviewers aware of it. And then again, publication showing, it's good if you have publications showing early achievements beyond the state of the art, or actually touching the border of the state of the art. And this is often judged if, for example, some of your papers have been taken by some other scientists to build upon them. This is already a proof that you can go above the state of the art. And the point is, you really have to state it, because the reviewer or the panel member doesn't know that. So you really have to tell them, look, this work that I did was useful because it brought these other people, these other scientists to do this. And then, of course, the ERC, but all the projects that you can write at this level evaluate your level of commitment to the project. So if you write a project and then you do not put any of your time into that in terms of budget, they will tell that you basically are not committed enough to that project. Usually the ERC asks 75 to 80. I don't think they ask for it, but it's preferred to put 75 or 80% of time into that project. Good. So this was the profile, and the researcher profile is what really counts on what is called in the ERC word the part B. Sorry, the part B1 of the profile, which is where you really describe yourself. These are some of the reviewer comments that I received. I'm not putting them here to gloat or anything. I'm just putting them here to show you what you should aim for when you write a proposal. You want a reviewer or a panel member to tell you these things. Excellent publication record, clear evidence of independence and leadership. This is very important. Active in popular science teaching and service to the scientific community. This was very positively evaluated. And I should say that I did all that. I did a lot of outreach, teaching, sometimes not even too recognized officially. I proposed to do service to the scientific community, for example, through Inqua and Pages, by proposing myself to lead first little projects and then slightly bigger ones. Now I'm the leader of one working group into Pages. But when I did it, I didn't think this was something that would bring me to a positive evaluation in the ERC. I was just following my instincts. I was just liking to do that because it's really great to organize a workshop and to realize that everybody's happy afterwards. So if you feel like doing it, just do it because you like it, and then it will count in the end. Well connected and well regarded, has worked with many co-authors, etc. This was what I was telling you before about reaching out to scientists in my field and basically asking them, hey, I have this idea. Would you like to chat about this? Would you like to meet at this conference when it was still possible meeting? Many years ago, we went to conferences and we didn't do everything online. But so that's really what counted. Somebody commented that I'm enthusiastic, capable, accomplished. I don't know, probably they knew me in person, because I don't know how you can get that from a written evaluation. This is only the written part. And this is, again, very important. The majority of his papers are without his PhD supervisor, and many include his students. So at some point, I was able to show the panel that I matured after my PhD into a more independent person, an independent scientist. And this is really what they like. And again, independent thinking comes from being able to separate yourself from your initial group where you did your master or your PhD, for example. So the point is that your CV really counts, as I tried to show you, but it's your idea that is the one that will seal the deal. I mean, you could be Albert Einstein, but if you propose something which is really bad, you will really have no chances to go through an ERC evaluation. I mean, at least from my understanding of the process. So the idea must have, and this is all written also in the guidelines of the ERC, more on that a bit later, must be innovative and risky and not incremental. So this means, for example, that if I am a scientist working on, let's say, some, I don't know, I'm working on coastal changes and I'm studying beach erosion, proposing a 5-year monitoring on the same beach for 5 years might be absolutely interesting for the processes, to understand the processes, but it's looked as an incremental study. So you are basically proposing more of the same that could be replicated in another place and with other types of funding. And an idea, actually, a good idea, actually may take years to develop. And here starts a little bit of a storyline that I'm about to tell you. And developing an idea includes being rejected. So there are only two types of scientists: those who have been rejected a lot of times and the liars. So here we go. Actually, I want to start my review of my rejections. So what is about to start is a review of the rejections that led me to get finally a proposal accepted. To jumpstart it, I want to give you a quote by von Goethe, who said that daring ideas are like chessmen moved forward. They may be beaten, but they may start a winning game. So don't be too sorry if you're beating it the first time or the second or third or fourth time. That's it. So first proposal I have ever wrote for the National Environmental Research Council, NERC, UK, 2011. I was just finishing my PhD. Probably I wrote it when I was still writing my PhD. And this was really bad. And it was rejected. Why do I say it was really bad? Because I went back and I took back that old file and I realized that I had several problems. So my 2020 me told my 2011 me that I was really naive. So I was proposing to one of the big schemes, the biggest schemes in the UK, a project that was really local. So I was planning to look at Mediterranean changes in sea level in some places, which was interesting in itself, but it was really too local. I had no big questions in there. I had no reason, I didn't say any reason why I wanted to do this. And also, it was really immature. The writing and the wording was really immature. My English was not so good, but the organization overall wasn't really up for the task. And this came because when I wrote this proposal, this happened because when I wrote this proposal, I never followed any course, not even a webinar like this one on proposal writing. So I was just basically, you know, I'm going to take a Word file, I'm going to write some stuff in it, send it to the agency, and I was hoping to get the money for it. Didn't happen. But some of what I wrote later on evolved, and we could use that in a review paper that we published to get that has as first author Matteo Vacchi, who is a great friend of mine and a great colleague of mine. And we also happened to share a desk during our PhD. So basically, Matteo and I were saying, okay, let's take some of the state of the art that you did for that project, and let's put it in a paper together. And thanks to Matteo mostly, this happened. So we got something out of it, although we didn't get funded. I didn't get funded. Then I tried the Marie Curie grant. Again, here I was proposing to do a classification scheme of the different coastlines around Europe. So, and to tie that classification scheme into coastal hazards and coastal risks. Guess what? I got rejected. And really, if I look at that proposal, I can really realize that this was really technical work that I was proposing, and the science was in there, but was not really explicited. And one of the big problems was that my work plan was absolutely badly organized. And again, I hadn't followed any course that would teach me how to do like simple things, like doing a work plan. And I wasn't tackling any big question. Comes 2012, I repropose another Marie Curie. I was really persistent about that, and that gets rejected as well. And again, here I hadn't followed any course yet, but reading back that proposal, I actually understood that my problem kept being that I could not really make clear for the reviewers what was the science behind it, what was the scientific question, why do I want to do this? I was just still following my naive way of doing something because I like to do it, because I like to learn about it. Well, this doesn't work when you're proposing your research to somebody. And if you think about it for a second, it wouldn't work in any business environment, because if you go to somebody telling them, you know, to some company telling them, can you give me some money? They might say yes, but they might ask you what you want to do with this money. And if you present them a plan which is not super tight and super well thought, they might tell you, look, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to trust you with my money. So this is what I was missing back then. But still, also for this Marie Curie, I was actually able to use and spin some of what I wrote in a paper that came out a couple of years, 3 years later, where I basically took the entire state of the art that I did for that proposal. It was like 3 or 4 pages, and I expanded that into a bigger review of the state of the art of mid-Pliocene shorelines. In this case, very old shorelines along the United States coastal plain. So I was able to actually not throw away everything and keep working with that. And 2014 was actually 2012, 2014 was actually the moment where I landed in the United States, and luckily I was offered some courses, so I could take writing courses, I could take project planning courses, thanks to different organizations that were offering them for free to any postdoc or student or PhD who wanted to do that. And also I could really work in collaboration, in this case with Maureen Ramo and Paul Arty, who are two very knowledgeable scientists, and they have been writing thousands, if hundreds, if not thousands of proposals. So they really know what goes into every section, and they really know how to talk to the reviewers. Well, guess what? It was rejected as well. But rereading, having a look at this proposal, and knowing what I went through, so knowing that I was preparing myself. In this case, the feeling I got is that this was really mature. There was a global scope, but it just needed to be better framed. And probably I was underestimating a bit the budget. But I hope you can see through this little description that I was sort of maturing throughout my proposal writing. So every proposal, I was using it to mature towards something better, towards a better approach. Also on this one, we wrote a paper. So that's really a leitmotif in my career. I always try to write down something after I do a state of the art. And back in 2018, when I did for the first time this presentation, I found this very interesting graph that might explain what was happening to me in hindsight. So this study that came out summarized by The Economist was basically saying that the applicants who have several near misses in the threshold of funding are actually doing better in the long run. So if you have a near miss, you actually learn by your mistakes. If you have a near win, you might not mature enough on the weaknesses of the proposal you had, because you were successful and you get the money. So it's a short-term success, but you might have more problems or more difficulty in being more impactful as you go forward. I mean, I like that. I would have liked to have some of those proposals funded as well, but this is the explanation I give myself for not being funded. And 2014 is when really the tide turned for me, because when I applied to the position that I hold now at MARUM, University of Bremen, I had to write a proposal. It was a position funded within a big German scheme, the Excellence Initiative, and every applicant had to write a project, because with the position there was attached a significant grant to establish your own group. So they wanted to see a plan. And when I did this, it was actually the easiest thing I've ever done, because probably I was mature. I was taking from what from my mistake. I was learning from my mistakes in the past. Again, I proposed another project in 2017, and it was approved. And I found myself asking, what changed from my early rejections to now? Surely my ideas matured. So all of these projects are about sea level changes and paleo sea level changes. They all rotate around the same broader topic. But in the very first ones, I was really naive. So the moment where you recognize your naivety, I think, is the moment where you mature, where you think, okay, this is it. I am more mature now. I learned, thanks also to all my colleagues and to the papers I read and to the exchanges I had, to tackle bigger problems. For example, in this project, I'm writing about Southeast Asia. I want to take data in Southeast Asia, but I tied that Southeast Asian problem into a much larger global problem of changes in sea level and what we can understand from past changes in sea level. So that triggers a little bit the importance of the project. And for sure, I learned how to write much more. And this I owe to the many colleagues who corrected all my language, and my writing. And I learned how to care much more about the graphics I put in the proposals and in the papers for the matter. So I really became more very, very focused on making graphics look good, especially in the proposal. This is really important. We're gonna tell a little bit about it. So the lessons I learned are basically that this is a marathon and not a sprint. If an idea is good, in my case, persistence paid off. In my case, it was really useful to use what I wrote for the proposals to draw up review papers. Also because in the later successful proposals, I was actually able to claim that I was part of the state of the art, that review I did was actually part of the state of the art now. So it's something that helped me out making a case later on. And as well, something I've seen happen a lot of times is that if a proposal is rejected, then you put it on a shelf and you leave it there. And instead, what I found out it works really well is to keep reshaping ideas as new literature comes out. Because if 1 year passes and you're not reshuffling it, then it's gonna be an old proposal and not new. So step number 2 is when you, after the idea has been conceived, then you have the inception of the idea. And Victor Hugo famously said that no army can withstand the strength of an idea whose time has come. So you really, at some point, you realize that the ideas you have are mature enough to be proposed. And for this, I have, for me, 4 major points that worked. So the first one is to really try and streamline your idea by defining the research gaps very shortly and trying to be very concise about what are the research gaps. So for example, this is a graphic from my ERC proposal. And what I do here is basically showing on one side the last interglacial. So I'm saying this is the last interglacial. We have higher temperatures than present, etc. And on the other side, I am just stating what are the big gaps that we have in the research, and they have to deal with the 3 big questions that I was putting in front of you at the beginning of this presentation. So I put this figure. This is figure 1 of my proposal on page 1, and I did this on page 1 because if the reviewer or the panel member who's evaluating my proposal will ever have the doubt going through my proposal, they will be able to go back to page 1 and cross-check the objective. So keep the objective right there. Same with the overarching goal, and a very important thing I think is to be able to summarize in 1 sentence. I know it's super hard. And I did, for the ERC grant, I rewrote my overarching goal, I think 100 times until I was happy about it. And I summarized that in 3 points that are literally 1 sentence each. So what is the overarching goal? Constrain the last interglacial peak sea level record, unravel last interglacial sea level oscillation, quantify wave changes in the last interglacial. That's it. You don't need to tell more in the very beginning to the reviewer. Another important thing when you start to thinking and to streamline your idea is to have in mind the actions that you need to do and the cross connections between the actions. So this is another graphics I used to describe my work packages. Of course, each one of these has a half page on its own at some point in the proposal. But by putting this very clearly at the very beginning of the proposal, page 2 or 3 it was, you're actually telling the reviewer that you have a plan. that's my plan in very simple and straightforward terms. So for example, work package 2, I want to get field data. You have a hammer there, you have a coastline, and I'm telling you that I want to survey last interglacial indicators with high precision over a transect, blah, blah, blah. Then I'm going to give you all the details you want in the proposal. But this is the main plan. That's the plan I have. Good luck with COVID, by the way, which is a problem we're having now. And last but not least, I really think a very important thing is to highlight the relevance of whatever you are proposing to do. So the ERC in particular and many other grants, they want blue sky research. That's great. But you also have to keep in mind if there is any societal relevance or importance of or perceived importance of your project, then this is it's really important not to let the reviewer guess it. Just tell them, just write that to them very clearly. Another thing that has to be done that worked for me after I streamlined my idea was to ask the hard questions and also have my colleagues to read my streamlined idea, which was 1 page at the time, and ask them, can you ask me the hard questions? So is it groundbreaking enough? It is feasible, but with risky aspects. Is it incremental? And it shouldn't be. If it is, you have to refine a bit more. You have to go back to the conception. And for the ERC and for bigger, larger grant schemes, the ERC starting grant the top is 1.5 million euros. You should also ask yourself, do I really need a team to perform my idea, to perform this project, and lots of money? Because maybe you don't. So you can look for a smaller project, a smaller team. Maybe you don't need a big project. And one thing that really worked for me as well was to get out there and challenge my colleagues. So this is something I did at the European Geosciences Union a year more or less before that I presenting my project. I asked for a talk at the European Geosciences Union, and I went there and I basically blurted out my general plan, and especially I blurted out the big questions. And this is the slide number 1, where I told them I just want to throw stones in a still pond and see what you think about it. Now, this talk sparked a bit of controversy. A few scientists came back, a few colleagues came back to me saying, well, I don't really think you can do that. And this is when I knew I was really on track for something good, because if it's groundbreaking, if it's challenging, then you're on the right track. After you do all this, I'm sorry, but you have to start writing your grant. So, one good advice to always keep in mind, the first time I heard of this Blaise Pascal quote was from my postdoc advisor, Mo Ramo. And once she told me that Blaise Pascal, quoting Blaise Pascal, if I had more time, I would have written a shorter letter. So one thing I always like to keep in mind when I write is, can I say this in a simpler way and in a shorter way? Because in the end, that will sum up to a significant amount of effort that the reviewer of your proposal has to do to understand you. If you can sum it up, shorten it up, then you're on a good track. And I took some time ago, I was looking at this McGill University sort of guide to write proposals. It really stuck with me. So you have the original there, and I sort of edited a little bit what worked for me. But they have a really nice guide about it. So you have this in the slides. I will give you the slides later on. And I took out, let's say, 10 points that I really like. So number 1, which should always be done, read the manual. And there's an F before manual. Every project, every proposal, every grant, every agency has instructions to write the proposal. Make sure you really read them and you really know what they're asking you. because the reviewers will use the same guidelines to evaluate your proposal. So they will see if you really abided by, or if you're really answering what the proposal is asking you to do. Something that I really like to do is to break down the proposal into points and start small. For each section, I start really small, 1 or 2 sentences, and then I streamline them. I see if they make sense, and then I keep expanding the section as much as I can. And then I come back and I trim them down, trying to be short. So it's a never-ending process. Another thing that I experienced as a reviewer is that you really get frustrated as a reviewer if you do not understand jargon and acronyms. So you keep going back, trying to find what that acronym means or what that jargony sentence means. So for example, in my ERC, what I did was at the very beginning, bottom of page 1 or page 2, this box was telling the reviewer, if you need an acronym, it's here. If you need to know something jargony, it's here. So this basically helps the reviewer trying to understand what you mean and try to follow your discourse. Another thing that is really important is also this from a reviewer side. Try not to have the reviewer tell the sentence that Snoopy says here in the last figure, what did I do to hurt you? Just sometimes by reading what I wrote, for example, I have the feeling that I'm too convoluted and you know, I'm not making sense out of what I want to say. So what I suggest to do is really try and getting the reviewer by the hand, as somebody once told me, just trying to imagine that you are about to build a big museum of something that you really like, you know, a fossil collection. And here comes somebody who has lots of money to invest in your fossil collection, but they really want to know what is this about. So you really have to meet them in the entrance, show them the entrance, make an impression, and then show them really clearly what you want to do. And you have to make a big impact in the very first sentences, because that's what sets the tone for the entire review. Again, have a clear title. That's really important. Titles that are too convoluted or not really self-explanatory are pretty hard to understand. So warm coasts, I guess it's quite self-explanatory. Sea level and extreme waves in the last interglacial. This is the title of my proposal and the acronym. Now, this is a little bit of something that I did differently from following the instructions, because if you read the instructions, it's not really clear. They are asking you for an acronym of your proposal. So it should be an acronym, but this is not, because I realized that many people is basically giving short names to their proposals to appeal to, or to make immediately understandable what this is all about. So that was not a hard requirement from the ERC. So I could do this. Again, care about your graphics. I already told you that. I've been on the reviewer side of proposals that basically copied and pasted graphics, referencing them, etc. So totally allowed. Graphics from publications, from other publications. But I always find that when an author is presenting me, also in papers, or somebody who proposes a project with clear graphics, with something fresh, I actually appreciate it more, because it is really custom made for that particular proposal. So you can adjust other graphs, but it will never look as good as a new graph to explain exactly what you want to mean in that part of the proposal. And this comes back to probably my experience in the private sector. I would never dream of going to present a project to somebody for 1.5 million euros. Unluckily, I never did in the private sector. I would never dream of going with a sloppy written project. I would just want the project to be very well done and very well cared of. Show that your research is feasible. That's another advice I really followed a lot, but also demonstrate that you're not trying to hide the weaknesses and the threats. So this is project writing 101. So you should always be aware of the strengths of your project, the opportunities that might arise through your project, the weaknesses that might impact it, and the weaknesses that your project has, and the threats. If you hide the weaknesses and the threats, you're not doing your job right. You really have to try and embrace them. For example, I have one page in my proposal about the risks of not being able to obtain the field data I wanted. I never thought about the COVID situation. Now we are basically stuck at home, so we cannot really go out and take data, but that's an unforeseen risk. But I was really thinking about the risks and potential measures that I would use to mitigate those risks. And what the ERC wants to see is actually a risky project. So here it is, there you are. And again, back to the museum sort of statement. Imagine you're bringing this person, from the entrance of your museum. You're showing your very nice collection that is in progress. You're showing the future plans that you have. And then you basically bring him at the door, you close the door and say bye. You would not leave a good impression. So what you have to do is trying to also close your proposal with some sort of statement, a vision of how your research will make a contribution to knowledge. The same way you would not shove off the door the big donor to your museum, but you would actually try to offer them a coffee and try to show them that you really have a vision for the future for your museum. Proposal is like a museum in the end. Another thing that really worked for me, and I would be always thankful to this many colleagues who helped me out with this, is get the proposal reviewed and commented by colleagues you trust, by people who you really trust, and who are not just going to tell you, oh, that's great, just go on, but really are trying to find the weaknesses in your proposal and really are caring about trying to help you out with that. It's difficult to find these kind of colleagues, but I'm sure you have them. For example, I gave this proposal to read to a good friend and colleague of mine who is a marine ecologist, who is totally out of my field. But he really had some very good insights about the proposal not being clear in some places for somebody with a PhD in environmental sciences. So if you think about it, you really want your proposal to be clear for as broad as possible audience. And last but not least, something that people does not a lot is try to spend a lot of time drafting your budget. This is also something that I experienced in connection with the private sector. A clean budget, or a very well described and clean budget, actually shows that you mean it, that you really mean what you are proposing, that you really mean to use this money. And I'm sure that even a badly drafted budget will bring you to, let's say, you will be able to work around it, but it doesn't give the same feeling of a well-planned action and a well-drafted budget. So this is my work plan. This is the work plan that I did. You see my 5 work packages, same colors throughout the entire proposal. So if you see blue, you're like, oh yeah, work package number 1. What I did was really describe each action. For each action, described which researcher was assigned to that action, describe the expertise that person needed, so that I wanted from that PhD or postdoc to have, also giving already a sense for the call that I would make for that person to come and work for us. And of course, every action has a budget, and that budget must be well thought. So this is how it should play out. And something that I have seen on and off when I was reviewing is that if you have a lab and if you have things available to work on the project and no cost for the project, it's good to say it. Just if you have instruments to go out in the field, as I had in my lab, thanks to previous proposals, there you go. This is what I have. So you're telling the funder that you're not starting from scratch, that you really have something to build upon. So from the inception to the written proposal, it took me 1 year. So I really took a lot of time in to really from the streamlined points, that one pager, to the it's almost 30 pages of proposal. It took me 1 year in terms of timing. I'm slow, you might be faster. This is just to give you an idea what happens when you hand in the project to the ERC. This is specific to the European Research Council starting grant. The part A, there are 3 parts. Part A is what you compile together with your university. Basically information, technical information, budget information on you, on the PI, and on the host institution. Part B1 is what contains information on your track record, so you, and a synopsis, a short synopsis of your project. Part B2 is what contains the full project description, including the budget and ethics in very, very high details. So B1, I think, is 10 pages and B2 is 20. I'm not sure I have these numbers right, but it's all in the manual. After you submit it, you go through eligibility checks. So first of all, they check that if you are this many years from your PhD, etc. And then you go to the step 1 where your part B1 is evaluated. So if the evaluation of you and the synopsis of your idea is good, you go to the second step of the proposal. At the second step, what happens is that the panel takes part B1 and part B2, and it sends that to the external reviewers. So at that point, the reviewers do their job and really give you and really go through your proposal and evaluate your proposal. At that point, what they do is there is a panel meeting, and they basically assess the proposal, and you get invited to the interview if you're ranked high enough. After the interview, you get ranked in a list of proposal, and if your proposal is high enough, gets funded. What is very interesting, I think, there are 2 things that are very interesting about the entire ERC process, as I just briefly described to you, is that you never see your reviews until either your proposal is rejected or you go to the interview. So when you are at the interview, the panel members who are in front of you have the reviews in their hands, but you don't. So you don't know what the reviewers were saying about your proposal. You only know that it was good enough to be admitted to the final step of the interview, of you being in Brussels. Just to be a little bit lighter on the review part, in 1984, it happened that Cesare Emiliani, a famous paleoclimatologist, was actually sent by accident his own proposal to review by the NSF. And if you read through it, you can find it on the internet. It's pure comedy gold, because he did the review of his own proposal, and he's basically telling the panel that he's a genius, and that Emiliani told him himself several times. But he didn't realize he was a genius of such transcendental proportions. So this is just a joke, but this is really what you want the reviewers to think about you. You really want the reviewers to think, wow, this person is really good. This proposal is really great. So you really want them to understand every aspect of it and every little bit of it, because the competition is very high, especially in a ERC setting. The competition is very high. So proposals which have an evaluation which is, oh, this is good, they might not fly as a proposal because they are stacked against proposals that have evaluations that are outstanding. So if you're lucky, this is the letter you get, and you have to sit down at your desk and stay 10 minutes looking at it, making sure that you really read correctly, that they're waiting for you in Brussels at that time and at that day. So this is what you get. And if you see below here, there's an interview date and a time, and you have to show up at almost exactly that time and go up into an interview room. Just to close out, again, I know that many proposals do not have the interview stage, but The interview stage for the ERC is really important. And quoting again Mark Twain, he once said that it usually takes me more than 3 weeks to prepare a good impromptu speech. And this is actually what they ask you. So the ERC asks you about to give a 5 minutes presentation, so very quick, about your science, about what you're proposing. And then they will discuss with you 20 minutes with the reviews in hands that you don't know about. You can make, in some cases, you can make slide printouts. In my case, I did an infographic for the review, for the panel to have in their hands. And I really practice a lot. I really, to do this interview, I really prepared a lot. I followed courses. I watched lots of online talks. This book is really great, A Talk Like That. It's basically advices from people who gave outstanding TED Talks. And it really helped me out to watch these talks several times. And to record, I even recorded myself, and I was watching myself trying to understand if I was good enough, if my presentation skills were good enough. And I know it's really hard, at least for me it is, because many scientists, including myself, have lots of imposter syndrome hanging on them. But it's very important to be confident when you go to the interview stage of the ERC, because in the end, it's your project. If you are there, it means that you really are proposing something that is interesting for a broad number of scientists. I think in the end, there are like 14 or 15 different scientists between panel members and reviewers that actually evaluate your proposal. So you really have to try to be confident when you present. And something that is that really goes into the borderline of stalking is study your panel. So trying to understand not as much who is in your panel, because you don't know the names of the people who is in the panel, but the expertise that you have inside the panel. So PE10, for example, is composed by people in earth sciences with many different expertises. So you have deep ocean people doing planetary science, people doing, many different approaches, working with many different approaches. So if you look at the website, what you find is the panels from the years before, and you can sort of understand a little bit what is the composition of the panel. So you might also foresee some questions that you actually might get from those scientists, because if you know the topic, you might actually understand a little bit what they would be more curious about. And as well, know your weaknesses before you go into that interview. So again, exploit the advice of friends and colleagues as much as possible. I organized 2 or 3 mock interviews with colleagues from my center, promising to offer beer or tea or whatever they would drink to just help me out by challenging me on the weaknesses of my project. And this turned out really great. This is what I have for you today. I hope it was useful. I'm open to questions. Again, it's my experience. It's not gold, but I hope even if one thing will help you out, I'm really happy about this. So thank you very much for being here.
Thanks, Alessio. So we got questions in the chat window, and
okay.
Let's start with those, maybe.
Okay. Lutra, I think it's Marie-France Lutra. She's asking, should the applicant be based in Europe to apply to this grant? I do not think so. I don't think you have to be in Europe already, but I do know that you have to be, your research will have to be based in Europe or one of the member states. I think Switzerland, for example, is, or sorry, not member, but third, I don't know how they're called, but other participating members. So I think you can also be outside Europe when you propose, but again, it's in the guidelines. grant call to open to all nationalities. This I can say yes. This I can say yes. It is. There's no nationality requirement. Only time from your PhD requirement. Didn't catch what grant it is. ERC starting grant. It was proposed. That's a question we also had this morning. Isn't it risky to throw stones in the pond, given that someone could steal your idea? Yeah, we had this question also this morning. It is risky, for sure. I should also say that when I did that presentation, I was mostly trying to elicit an answer on the questions or on the provocative questions that I had, rather than showing my hand on what I wanted to do in the proposal. And that's really a thin line to walk, right? Although I commented also this morning, and I repeat today, I repeat now, that stealing of ideas, yes, it is something we have seen. Many of us have seen. But I would also say that it's becoming more and more condemned, at least in my field. So if you are a senior or a mid-career researcher stealing an idea from an early career researcher, your career is pretty short, and you're not a very good person, by the way. But yeah, you have to really, try to thread carefully in there. A clean budget, yes, it's very important. I assume that working in the Dutch Antilles will require permits from the local authorities. Did you have these permits ready when you submitted the application? That's a very great question. And the answer is no. By the way, the Dutch Antilles was another project I worked on. But what I did in the proposal was actually putting very clearly that I'm aware of permits requirements in the places where I wanted to work on, and I presented my experience in obtaining those permits, similar permits in other areas. So yes, this is something you really have to put clearly, because otherwise you cannot do the job at hand. But you don't have as far as I know, you do not have to have the permits in place already to submit the application. It helps to have, for example, a collaborator, or to mention a collaborator in that country, saying that if the project is successful, then research permits will be taken care of at the very start of the project. So this is what we do. How many collaborators external would you say are okay? In the ERC grant, I mentioned 3 or 4 colleagues with whom I really wanted to collaborate. But also you have to be very careful in saying that, or in making really explicit that the budget is not going to go to them. The budget is for you and your group. And if collaborators want, of course, collaborate on the project, etc., there should be no budget exchange between institutions. That's really important, because it's really checked that the beneficiaries listed in the proposal are really those where the money is going to. Thanks so much. Thank you. Based on Xavier, hi Xavier. Based on your experience, what do you think the capacity of the host organization makes a difference in getting your proposal funded? For the ERC, not as much. The research organization has to provide basic, let's say, support, equipment, etc. But what I found out that being at MARUM, when the moment that is a very well organized institution, the moment I started to say I want to apply to an ERC grant, they really put at my available for me lots of help to do this, and even trying to organize mock panels for me, and they really were going a long way trying to make this happen. So institutional support in that sense, it matters a lot. On the other sense, just in writing, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter much. So it's just you need to have an institution that hosts you. Last question is, do you have any data on amounts of submissions and success rates? I don't, but you can find it very easily on the European Union, the ERC portal. So if you go through that, there's all the success rates divided by disciplines and panels throughout the years. Another question is, can I ask, how did you decide if you wanted a postdoc or PhD students in your project? Really, in my project, I'm asking for both postdocs and PhDs. It's really about the task that you really want to, to assign them. I should say that there's usually a bit of balance. There must be a bit of balance, because if you think about a PhD position, you also have to assume a mentoring side to it. So you have to assume that you have to, you cannot give a PhD student a very central task with the risk of basically burning the entire project, because there is a mentoring side to it. So you really have to give the correct actions to each. Whereas a postdoc maybe has more ability to take care of a part of a project independently, maybe, and to bring it on a bit more independently. So there's these aspects to take into account. I also saw that the grant opening will be in January and last until March, but you write for a year. I assume there are templates and instructions. Yes, basically the templates and instructions from the year before are usually the ones that you're going to use the year after. So I remember that the only thing that changed I started with the material from the previous year, and the only thing that changed were the cutoff dates and some minor details. So the ERC is pretty consistent in giving their guidelines. So yeah, I hope I answered every question you had. Any more or any? Thank you. Thank you. I see many thank you. Thanks to you, and good luck, I would say, to how it is to run an ERC project. That's interesting, especially because these days I'm writing my first periodic report to the European Union. I'm not gonna lie, it's lots of fun. It's good. You have to take a lot of responsibilities that maybe as a PhD or a postdoc you don't have. But also it takes work. It requires work. It requires some work on the side of administration as well. So you need to learn the basics of how to manage the grant, because of course you are supported by your university, but the best manager of your grant is yourself. But it's something that I would totally suggest, because it's also the ERC is one of the top schemes in Europe for research, especially for young researchers, and the opportunities that are coming when you have your ERC grant, starting grant, is really a turning point. For me, it was really a turning point in my career. So I would definitely say that it's really, I would really suggest it. Of course, now, for example, I have to deal with all the problems deriving of project delays for the COVID situation, but this is what happens, right? This is what you have to cope with if you're managing a project, and you do it. Allora, okay, Janina is asking me, Janina, how did you manage to work in science when your proposals were rejected? That's a great question. Well, number one, I was really lucky. My PhD was funded, so the first row of proposals were written while I was finishing my PhD, and so I was funded. I funded my company actually because I was afraid I would not be able to maintain myself into science. Not that it helped, because for the first years my company was really going down. And then the other proposals, I actually wrote them when I had the position. So I was a postdoc, and I agreed with my supervisor, okay, I'm going to work 2 months on this. Do you agree? So that's how I did. I know it's really complicated, because if you are on strict deadlines and your position is finishing, then that's a huge problem. I guess lucky is my answer, as in many things. But thank you for bringing this up. So, Kaja Fen, how do you frame presenting a potentially very novel idea at talk? My worry would be someone more senior taking it and applying for grant themselves. Yes. Look, I thought long and hard when I was proposing, when I was presenting at the European Geosciences Union my ideas. I should say that I didn't present it fully. I mostly presented the questions. So I wanted to know if the questions were controversial. And the questions are out there. I mean, more or less everybody in the community is thinking about it. But that's a big risk. I would say, though, that it's happening. I saw it happening, but I see it happening less and less, because the stigma of taking an early career researcher proposal and apply for it yourself, it's starting to be really, really big. So if you do that, if somebody does that, they will have a name, their name doomed for a long time. So yeah, and of course you have to use a little bit of let's say, try to be a little bit smart in how you present your science. I didn't present exactly what I wanted to do. If you want to be, sure, don't do that. Just do that with your colleagues. Don't do that in a conference, for example. I hope I answered. So Robert Reinecke, thank you. That was great. Thank you. Great talk. Thank you.
Alessio?
Okay. Yeah.
Can I make a question?
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Liz. I don't know if you remember, but I'm Carla's former advisor. And thank you for your talk. It's nice to finally meet you here. And really thank you for sharing your experiences and knowledge. And it really helped me a lot, because I guess I am in a phase where you have failed a lot of times, lots of rejections. So it's really nice to hear that some other people made the same experience, and that you give me hope that it's okay, to try an ERC, because I'm always thinking the chances to succeed are really low, and that's what people know. And but you give me a lot of hope, and I also notice the more you fail, the more you know what you can improve, and the knowledge is there. And the few proposals that were accepted are just like you said, the ones that you write really fast and you have everything already in your head, and not working locally, but more, like abroad, and connecting all of that. So yeah, I just want to say hi, and you're a great scientist and advisor, and I'm really happy that you are really active in this kind of activities.
Thanks, thank you. Nick, I go on reading questions. I have some in the chat. Paul Zander is asking me, can you give some advice about how far outside your research field is reasonable to propose research in, or how to go about pursuing an idea which is a bit different than your previous experience? That's a tough one. Look, recently I've been burned by one experience I had, where I was proposing something slightly out of my field, in the field of coastal hydrodynamics. And I got a pretty bad review, which was saying, who are these guys? I never heard of them. My answer would have been different if I hadn't had this experience. So I don't really know how to answer that. I still finding the answer to that one. For sure, for the ERC, you have to demonstrate that at least in your domain, you are independent, because this is mostly for the ERC, because for the ERC you really have to show independence, and you really have to lead a group into doing things. So you really have to teach them, or to be able to supervise people in your field. So I would say that too far out, it's not a good idea. the panel might have a problem with that. But you know, if the idea is really great and you can apply your knowledge, you can demonstrate that you can apply your knowledge to that, then you stand a chance. I hope I answered. So Konstantina Jadi asked me, what kind of questions were you asked in the interview? Only on the science or the proposal, or also on project management and budget? So both. I should say that I don't remember most of the questions because I was like, you know, all those athletes who are in the zone when they are in front of a panel. But a couple of questions, a couple of tough ones actually, were on the budget. Not specific. For example, I was proposing to do fieldwork in different countries, and they were asking me about research permits, and you know, and how much will it cost? And I was vague on that on the proposal because I know I will have costs for research permits, but I didn't really know how much it would cost me entirely. So I just told them, look, this is based on my experience working in similar countries, for example, in Argentina, and I was talking about going to Brazil. So it's South America. So I expect not to be too different, the costs not to be too different. So yeah, on both, on the science and on the budget. Okay, Nick Shaswal, your record of published papers is impressive, and I love your view to keep going. Was it your own initiative to publish papers about research proposals that were not accepted? In some cases, yes, it was my initiative, and in most cases was, you know, basically I just didn't want to throw out of the window a lot of work that I did to do the state of the art, you know. So I just went on, and of course, to write the papers, you have to add a lot of stuff and you have to change a lot of stuff. So okay, Lian Yang is asking, the call of the ERC is not still released. Do you or any others know the timeline for 2021? That I don't know. But what I can tell you is that if you write to the European Research Council, they usually are very quick to answer questions. I don't know when it's going to be released, the 2021. If anybody knows, feel free to answer. Start in January, deadline is in March. That's the, yeah. I don't have any more questions in the chat. So if anyone wants to ask more questions or curiosities, I hope I mean, that was my experience. It's not nothing particular, just what I went through.
Hi. Thanks a lot for the great talk and overview. And I love also the rejection part. That was really, you always see the success and you think this person are super successful and then you really feel down, but this was really great. I was wondering, I mean, not related to the ERC, but about incremental research. And I was wondering if you have any experience of like having funded incremental research, or, I mean, I guess that cannot be left on the side always, right? Yeah,
that is true. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry, I had to plug in my PC because it was running low battery. So I don't have a lot of experience getting incremental research funded. There are schemes that are actually more open to that kind of research. And absolutely, it's important. It's not second grade or, you know, anything bad. It's just that, for example, the ERC doesn't want to really see that. But for example, there are in my field there are some European schemes. There are the maritime schemes that are for cooperation between countries on actually very concrete objectives tied into science. For example, I don't know, monitoring studies or these kind of things. You know, whereas a monitoring study would never fly with the European Union unless you find something very exceptional about it. But there are schemes to fund that. So I guess it's again into find your you know, read the instructions, because for example, the incremental research part is really written on the ERC guidelines. I hope that answers your question.
I think those are the questions, unless someone writes something really fast now. So Alessio, thanks again so much for your time and for your inspiring talk. Indeed, it's very inspiring.